Steve Ingham, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you, because I've heard so much about you from our team, the Valuable 500 team, and they're like, you've got to talk to Steve Ingham, you've got to talk to Steve Ingham. So it's just really wonderful to speak to you. And because I guess the most important thing for people to know is that you are one of the very few of the FTSE 250 CEOs who has lived experience of disability. And I'm not going to tell your story. Do you want to tell a little bit about your experience with disability?
Sure. Yeah, I've been the CEO of PageGroup, often known by many as Michael Page, for 14 years. Well, 2 years ago, I was doing something that probably a lot of CEOs do, and that's go skiing. For the first time ever, I was skiing on my own, and I managed to lose control on an innocuous slope and disappear down a ravine. And so, of course, I was down there, lying in a river on my back. I instantly knew I was paralyzed because the only bit of me that wasn't cold was my legs. And so I was sort of lying in the river, you know, dealing with it, I suppose, realizing that I was probably going to be in a wheelchair and I'd have a different sort of challenge ahead of me. So yeah, from then on, it was basically, for those in the medical world, it was a T10, T11 complete fracture. So complete fracture means I went right the way through the spinal cord, and so I can't feel anything from just below my belly button, put bluntly, so that people can imagine. So I've had to learn how to sort of live life disabled, you know, from the complexity of getting dressed in the morning to all the other things that clearly you need to get control of below your waistline. So which is pretty tough. So 4.5 months in hospital, trying to run a company at the same time as trying
Did you stay running the company when you were doing rehab, or, you know, did you not take time off? Or?
Well, I was in a coma for 3 days. I took those 3 days off. No,
well, I'm kind of glad to hear that.
No,
okay.
I took a bit longer. We made an announcement to the stock exchange. You have to do that. And to be honest, at that point in time, I'm not sure they knew whether I was going to live or not, because they thought I might have a brain injury and I was in intensive care and so on. So they had to say something. I picked up the reins when I got back from Switzerland, which was a couple of weeks later. And I got into a small private hospital, so I had my own room. So I was able to talk to my staff, talk to shareholders, talk to the board. But my priority was, first of all, my family, because it was hugely shocking to my kids, particularly my daughters who traveled out to Switzerland and obviously were faced with their dad lying, you know, with thousands of wires and things plugged into him. Yeah. I think as well, you know, they've largely got through life without too many big difficulties. I think probably seeing their dad in that state was definitely a big learning experience and a big shock to them. So that was probably the most difficult thing I had to deal with, I think. You know, I don't like upsetting my children, and I'm sure I did. And, you know, so I guess I wanted to use the disability to make them proud of me if they weren't already, hopefully. And I wanted to show how I was going to deal with it and set an example to them. So, and not just them, to my staff, my company, but my other priority had to be to get out of there quickly. So, you know, being in hospital is okay, but you know, I'm thankful I'm not in hospital during COVID, because that would have been awful, you know, not having visitors and so on to support you. But I also wanted to do my 4 or 5 hours in the gym every day to get fit and to learn how to deal with things, you know.
Were you fit before? Like, are you somebody that's into fitness?
Yes, I was a lot, and a bit of a fitness freak, but I ran to work most days, so clearly I can't do that anymore. But and you know, I suppose I try to look at things positively, everything positively. You know, when I had the accident, I was 57. It was actually a couple of days after my birthday, and you know, I reflected on it. I've done a lot in my life. You know, I'm 57, so most of my career has happened, I guess. Yeah, look, I've done a lot. I've run a lot. I ran in nearly every city that I went to. I ran with colleagues a lot. I did a lot of sponsored stuff, you know, the Great Wall of China, these sorts of things. And you know, I played golf badly, and, you know, I played rugby till I was 40. So yeah, I've done a lot. and I feel that my legs, you know, I enjoyed them while I had them. So I didn't waste that opportunity, if you like. But now they're having a rest, and you know, clearly I have to lift them everywhere that I go, which is I've realized now how heavy they are. And of course, you know, I love being 6'4", and that's actually works against you when you're disabled, ironically, because it just means that the levers are too long, and you know, you're sort of pulling very long legs up onto the bed next to you or into the wheelchair or whatever. So it does make life a bit more awkward, as I found out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I tended to focus more on my legs, whereas now, of course, I have to focus on
here, the upper body. Yeah.
Which I sort of overdid last year because I managed to break all the titanium in my back. So
right, okay.
I had to go through the whole process of an operation again and have it all replaced. I was told not to exercise when I broke them the second time. So I had to take 3 months out of the gym. It's probably better for everyone around me that I just exercise.
Can I ask you, what was your experience of disability before your accident? I mean, did it even cross your radar? Did it come into your life? Yeah, like, was it something you were aware of even?
Good question. I mean, to a degree, yes, because we'd already launched, we're I think ahead of the game, ahead of most companies on diversity as a general rule. We've done.
And why is that? Is that you, or is that your people and you listening to your people, or where does that come from?
I'd like to think both. I mean, you know, I know what it's like to be uncomfortable in an environment, to trying, you know, to not in being able to be your full or complete self. I know what that's like because I went to boarding school. I had a few issues when I first went to boarding school and was bullied a lot. I was 11 and suddenly you're away from home for 12 weeks and you know, everyone's picking on you. And you know, I realized that it's not great, but certainly I would hate to be in the work environment. I mean, it makes no difference. If you're going to work and there's something different about you that you don't want to admit to and you can't even be yourself, I can't see how you can perform and enjoy yourself. And so we focused on diversity when I became CEO. We started really with women at Page, and then we moved up through basically ability at Page. Your question earlier had already kicked off. I suppose a lot of we had a lot of people coming out and talking about their experience, and most of it was around mental health.
Yeah.
Which was incredibly powerful. And I have had some experience of that with friends and so on. The only experience I'd had of a spinal injury was actually one of my best friends, if not my closest friend, his daughter 8 years ago. She had a skiing accident in America, and she's a sea-level injury, so up in the lower neck.
Yeah.
She's tetraplegic, and you know, I'd never asked a lot of questions of him. You know, he's quite a private person on that sort of front, but you know, the updates I would get from him on what she'd achieved, you know, she'd gone back to university, done a PhD in psychology to support people like us, or like me anyway, and you know, she's met an able-bodied person, got married, had a baby, you know, and I just that warms my heart. It really does, and I think that's fantastic. So. But that was the limit of my experience, and they're based in Australia, so it's not like I would see her.
Yeah.
So I was always, you know, getting stories rather than actually seeing her and living it firsthand. So no, beyond that, limited, and I think that's probably the case for most of us, isn't it?
And look, in your industry as well, because it's really interesting, just what the PageGroup does. But like, had that even surfaced? Had disability even surfaced within that? Like, or you know, I know, look, we're all now starting finally to really, and I think really engage with what inclusion, diversity, belonging is, and what, you know, that the business is representing the society to which it operates in. But I mean, it's been slow coming, hasn't it? And had disability ever been brought up by your clients before?
Rarely is the honest answer, sadly. Rarely. I think diversity's definitely been brought up by our clients. And
what was diversity for your clients? Because I was interested, like
they all start with gender. I think that that's, to be fair, because they feel it's the most obvious.
Yeah.
Probably the easiest thing to impact, maybe. You know, and I suppose the obvious difference is that you can generally tell a boy from a girl, you know. So it's fairly straightforward. You know, I can see which category you're in. The disability thing, I mean, particularly around mental health, it doesn't take a gene. We've got about 7,000 staff. 52% of them are women. You know, the rest are men. Very, very often, most of them are very young. Well, young to me anyway. You know, in their sort of late 20s. It wouldn't be a surprise to me that a lot of them had mental health issues or some sort of disability, but I just wouldn't be aware of it. And so it's an important thing that we support them. So we'd driven that agenda for a couple of years, but I didn't understand disability in the same way they understand it now. And I'm only just starting to learn even now. I mean, I have a day job, I'm a family man, and also I'm trying to learn about disability. I know quite a bit about spinal injuries for obvious reasons. I've been in hospital for 4.5 months, and you know, you know, things rub off on you. You learn a lot from the medical professionals and also, of course, other patients, which I got to know. But I'm starting to learn about other areas of disability. Frankly, some of those impress me even more than some of the battles that people with spinal injuries go through. And that's what impresses me about the people as individuals. They offer so much, and yet they seem to be constrained on what they can give to society, and that's wrong.
There's barriers in the way to enabling that potential to be released. I think that it's not just in business, but I think with us, with the Valuable 500, and this is why it's such an important community now, was that we felt the scale of the crisis with all those barriers, it can't be resolved by governments and charities and conventions. It needs you. It needs business. It needs business. This is the most powerful force to remove those barriers, to see the value of this community and their family, by the way.
Well, yes. And the stupidity of all of this is that you asked me earlier what clients are asking about. Did they ever ask about disability or whatever? No, but one thing they always say is that they all agreed upon is that there is a war for talent out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is desperately difficult to find extremely good candidates for all the roles that they want to recruit for. Mm-hmm. And yet there is this pool of 20% of the population that are absolutely qualified and frankly have the personal skills to probably add more value to their business than maybe some of the able-bodied candidates were able to find for them. So it is made even more ridiculous because I think they probably look at it in the wrong way. They look at the issues and the difficulties and the challenges and the problems we'll create for them, and the fact that, I don't know, we'll need more time off, or we're not as able. I mean, I must admit, I don't like the term disabled and abled, because I
just don't. I think there's too much conversation about that anyway. You know, we have a disability, we have an impairment, but like, yeah, it's part of who I am. It's not who I am.
Well, that's right, but it's almost in the word, isn't it? Because, you know, abled or not abled, and yet I think I've got as much ability as a CEO as anyone else.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not disability or ability. It's exactly. All of it.
So, you know, here's the irony, isn't it? You know, most leaders understand that there's a war for talent and they can't attract the candidates they need, and yet a lot of them are subconsciously ignoring this great pool of talent. So that's one element to it. The other is, and this is something that I think I've learned in the 34 years I've been in recruitment. I've interviewed a lot of people, of course, in that time. There hasn't been enough coming through the pipeline as well. And that is because some of the challenges, I think it's 80% of people who are disabled, they actually get their disability through their lifetime.
Yeah, between ages 18 and 64, when you're in work, mostly.
There you go. And so, you know, they're often dealing with that disability. I mean, they feel very different to how they felt before. You know, clearly I do. I'm a lot shorter, for example. You know, clearly there are certain things I can't do as quickly. You know, so for that reason, I have to be better organized than I ever was before. I thought I was super organized before as well. But now I have to be even more so because certain things take longer, like getting dressed in the morning. Yeah. So, you know, that can knock people's confidence big time, obviously. And so, you know, I've met a lot of kids who've had accidents like the one I've had, and typically it is a lot of kids, because you can imagine if you're going to break your back, it's usually doing something daft. It's the sort of thing that we all did when we were in our teens or in our early 20s, how is that going to knock your confidence when you're 18 years old? Now, I've dealt with it because I'm quite a confident person. I've achieved a reasonable amount, I'd like to think. But if I was 18 about to head to university or something and all my mates were disappearing there, how would I have reacted? And probably in a different way. And for that reason, some of those people are not getting into the pipeline. So we've got to really look at the long game here and how we can make them feel as wanted, as needed as anybody else, so that they can feel pulled out of their off the sofa, you know, where they're sort of sitting and feeling that they've got no value to anyone, and hopefully attract them into the pipeline of going to university and so on. So, you know, that's.
But do you think that this generation, I mean, so I grew up obviously hiding my disability, and I look at the generation now, you know, the under 30s, and I have got, you cannot but have great optimism, because it feels like we're talking about disability pride. That generation with tools that we didn't have growing up, social media, they're informed, they're convening, and they're this incredibly powerful, loud voice around what their value is and what we have to offer. And I'm thinking as a CEO, well, I want that younger generation as my consumers and as my talent, and you know, but most importantly, it's like young people who don't even have a disability will not accept companies who are keeping people out. They just won't. So it's such a compelling, this particular age group, I think, in this time is the greatest chance we have.
Without doubt. And I look, there's no doubt about it. The younger generation looks at life generally differently than we did when we were young. But in many ways, I mean, they're more critical. They're more judgmental. I mean, you know, people are talking already about COVID and the impact on the recruitment market. Well, I can tell you now that lockdown is a great time to reflect, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, we've all got time to reflect. Are we happy living where we live, in the type of accommodation we've got, the person that we're with? Are we happy with that? You know, do we want to live on our own or with people? Are we happy in the sector or the job, etc.? And already candidates are doing something about it if the answer is no. You know, we joke about people getting, you know, sadly getting divorced, you know, because of COVID, and they're saying, oh, you know, okay, enough's enough. Because they've been through a period of reflection and they're going, right, I'm going to do something about it. So, you know, there is no doubt about it. In the younger generation, it is more positive than probably we were, and also they get more support on the whole. That said, you know, there's some horrific statistics around spinal injuries, which will tell you that the average, I think, that somebody would be in hospital with an injury like this was 5.5 months. Today it's 3. Something's missing in that last 2 months. What was it? And a lot of it's around the psychological support, etc., etc. Yeah, it is still difficult. And then you're getting advice from the older generation as well. So 35% of people will get the advice: do not mention your disability on your application.
Okay, so I hid mine, right? And so 21 years ago, I came out of the closet. So you probably are aware, because you've heard it when EY did the research for us, 7% of our C-suite, of which you are part of, have lived experience of disability. But 4 out of 5 of them are hiding it. Or not, that sounds negative. 4 out of 5 of them aren't owning it publicly. And so, to your point, the older generation are telling people to not declare it. We're not declaring it still. And I guess why is the issue, and we can say fear and all of that stuff, but you're a kind of a lived example. So did your shareholders, after your accident, did you feel that they were kind of like, oh, what are we going to do with Steve now? Like, was there any of that kind of, did people's perceptions of you change? Like, did you see that fear come out, or the uncomfortableness that could be the barrier for this?
Not really. I mean, it crossed my mind, of course. And I had a conversation with somebody that I've got a lot of respect for, who, you know, I've known for a long time in my career, and it wouldn't be fair to mention him, but he called me up when I was in hospital, and we hadn't spoken for a while. And he said, oh my God, you know, I'm really sorry to hear this. And I said, oh, don't be sorry, I'm fine. And he came along to the conversation and said, well, what are you going to do when you get out? You know, get out of hospital. And I said, well, I'm going to go back run Page. You know, I've still got a few things to do that I want to achieve, and some goals to hit, a vision to achieve, and so on. And he said, but you're in a wheelchair. And I said, I noticed. And he said, well, you can't. And I said, why not? And he said, well, they won't take you seriously. They won't see you anymore. And I didn't want to get in an argument with him, or didn't, you know, want to get angry. So, you know, I just said, well, look, I see it differently. Now, I'd already gone through an experience which made me realize quite the opposite. And that was, I was getting, because I've been 34 years in the same company, it was only a couple of hundred people when I joined. It's now 7,000. I've traveled every country, launched many of them. And so, you know, a lot of people know me. I always publicly speak whenever I go to an office, to everybody from the receptionist to the managing director or whatever. I'll do an open Q&A. They can fire anything at me and do. So, you know, I was quite well known. I went running with a lot of them and so on. So, of course, they'd heard about the accident. We'd made the announcement. And they were sending me emails saying, well, look, when you're better, come back and run in Centennial Park with us, or run in, you know, Central Park with us, or run, you know, whatever. So they had no idea. So when I was pain-free enough, which was a few weeks, I got one of the carers to get me into a white shirt like this, and I held my iPad up on the tray that sort of you wheel in front of you over your bed. And I managed to get propped up enough in bed like this and recorded basically what had happened to me, and you know, I recorded the stupidity of the skiing accident, and you know, going into the stream and you know, being rescued and so on. And you know, what had upset me, you know, the kids, going back to my kids being shocked by it, and you know, and I talked about the fact that I won't be going running with anyone, and that I am actually going to be in a wheelchair. Yes, I will be the quickest in a wheelchair, and I'll have a flash one if I can afford it, but and all that sort of thing. But and I said, look, you know, I'm getting a lot of notes saying, really sorry to, well, don't be sorry for me, you know. And I said, don't be sorry for me. I'm fine. You know, I'm going to recover. I'm going to be strong, and you know, I'll be back at work and everything. And of course, I then I did this video, put it on our internal social media on Yammer, and wow, I honestly didn't expect the reaction I got. I mean, I got 7,000 emails, WhatsApp messages, parcels, food parcels from all over the world. I mean, it was great. And, you know, incredible comments, really powerful stuff that, you know, I was inspiring them. They'd shown it to their children, goodness knows what. And I realized this was far from lowering my respect in the business. It was actually raising it, because in their eyes, you know, I was overcoming an enormous challenge, which I suppose that was the case. And if anything, I think their respect went up, not down. The fact that I did come back from that and didn't give up. And, you know, particularly during COVID, people are still emailing me and saying, you know, whenever I feel down, whenever I think of you and some of the things you're having to overcome or had to overcome, you know, and that was inspiring. And I realized my responsibility as well. I mean, there was no way I could hide this anyway, for obvious reasons. I've got a wheelchair under me. But, you know, there's something positive in this, that I've got to be a role model, not just to my children, which of course I have, but I've got to be a role model to as many people as possible. That's how I see it. I think genuinely, I now have a better understanding of some of the challenges people are facing. And before, I probably couldn't empathize as well as I can now. I mean, you know, what would I say to those people hiding the fact that they're disabled and they feel they need to? I would say don't, because one of the most important qualities about leadership, I believe, is authenticity. And how can you be authentic if you're pretending to be something you're not, which is what you're doing if you're hiding a disability, surely? To me, I'm what I am. I mean, you know, I'm still the same pain that I probably was to a lot of people before, and I'm as demanding as a leader. I hope I'm a little bit more inspiring. I hope people think of, you know, business is about going through challenges, isn't it? And you know, most businesses are going through challenges at the moment related to COVID and so on. I know a bit about challenges, a bit more than I did before 2 years ago.
You know, and we started out to break, you know, the global leadership silence, the business leadership silence on disability inclusion. And you're one of them that we've done it. Like we're reaching 18 million employees globally through our community. And so now we're moving to phase 2, where we're going to activate you leaders and your businesses to really, to hack a solution for disability business inclusion across our supply chains. So I'd love just to hear from you about what you think, your gut instinct about what stands in the way of us actually changing this system, because I believe we can. We've got 500 of you. We've got the power of your supply chains, the power of you leaders, the power of your employees, the power of your brands. What do you think stands in the way for other leaders to be part of this? What do you think is their barrier? And what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's fear. I think that there's a problem with prioritization. So in other words, some leaders will be just prioritizing other things. We've got other things that are more important right now than that one. It could be that they're starting to work through diversity, and they're going, right, well, we're going to do gender first, and then maybe we'll do sexual orientation next, because that's quite fashionable at the moment, or whatever, and and then we'll eventually get to disability, maybe. I mean, obviously race came to the forefront, as it should have done last year, and it should have been there all along, but and sort of disability is the bit on the end where people go, well, yeah, we must take care of them, we must look after them, absolutely. Yeah. They need our help, they need our care. Well, we don't actually. The majority of the sector who are disabled don't need us, be cared for, or we don't need pity or sympathy or anything else. Actually, we just need to be respected like an able-bodied person and given an opportunity. And I think, again, if I was trying to defend them, I would say that I understand the disabled sector is quite complicated. Mm-hmm. It's not a simple thing. We're not all in wheelchairs or something.
We're not all the same.
No, that's right. We can't sort of just identify with them easily. We're not even aware of some of them, and we certainly don't know necessarily how to deal with it if we do need to accommodate any sort of anything that might just make their life easier or whatever. But what my answer would be, well, just talk about it. I mean, if you need to talk to people like me, I mean, I've got a view on disability, and obviously I've got maybe quite a lot of credibility to talk about it because I'm clearly disabled myself. And so let us sort of try to unlock this theory that it's complicated, expensive, that we are weaker, that we can't do as much for you or whatever. We can probably prove otherwise. Like I said, overcoming challenges is what business is about. I honestly believe those with a disability overcome probably more challenges in a day than most able-bodied people have to go through in their lifetime. I can only imagine some of the challenges you have, and I certainly see that advert on television where the lady says to Alexa, what's the weather out there? And the Alexa goes, it's raining, and she puts the dog on the lead and she puts a coat on and goes outside, and she can't obviously see. And I just think, oh my God, I'm not sure I could do that. I think she's probably the bravest person on the planet. And the challenges that we have to overcome with our different disabilities, I think potentially makes us better. And we should be using that in the workplace. And it's crazy that not. We're incredibly resilient. I mean, it's tough to get through some of these disabilities, and you have to be tough to do it. I've had a lot of operations, a huge amount of pain, being very close to death, etc., etc. I think personally, having interviewed a lot of people over 35 years, people who've been through those sorts of challenges have so much more to offer.
I agree.
And I think, therefore, on the one hand, you're talking about this shortage of talent, this war for talent. On the other, you've got this fantastic pool of people, 20% of the population. 14% of the population are graduate disabled, so they're qualified, and yet they're being ignored. And that's, a lot of it's been ignored, and that's absolutely ludicrous. And, while there's a breath in my body, I'm going to be shouting about it. I think it's great that we've joined up with the valuable 500, and combined, I think that can be a real force. wherever I can help, I will. And I'm just trying to learn a bit more, so I sound a bit more knowledgeable than I probably do at the moment. But there we go.
Well, Steve Ingham, thank you. And we will be shouting on you for help. And I really mean it. I think it's a roar now. There's going to be 500 of you.
For sure.
And thank you. I thank you for stepping up with us and being part of it. And I hope if we were to have a conversation in 3 years' time, we are not talking about the same thing.
No,
So,
there's more progress than there is today anyway.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you so much.